Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by and welcome to the COVID-19 media briefing. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. After the speaker's presentation, there will be a question-and-answer session. To ask a question, you will need to press star 1 on your telephone. Please be advised today's conference is being recorded. I'd like to hand the conference over to your speaker today, Teddy Tushon. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the call today. On this call focused on housing, we have Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, Minnesota Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, Katrina Hall, a tenant in Albert Lea, Minnesota, Tara Unken, a landlord and real estate broker in Marshall, Minnesota, and Emily Bastian, the Vice President for Ending Homelessness at Avivo. Also on the call and available to help answer questions today, we have Commissioner Jennifer Ho, Commissioner Jody Harpstead, Commissioner Jan Malcolm, and Assistant Commissioner Kathy Tenbrook. Just as a reminder to media, we ask that each reporter limit themselves to one question with a single on-topic follow-up just to ensure we can get to as many questions from as many different media outlets as possible. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz.
Thank you, Teddy, and good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Minnesotans. Thank you for joining us. Once again, unfortunately, you may have seen we put out the information that 92 of our neighbors lost their lives yesterday to COVID-19, a little over 6,000 new cases. We're still in the heart and the grip of this pandemic, and we're going to have to all pull together, as we've been saying. We spent a little time yesterday talking about first responders and trying to highlight the decisions that we make and how they can impact folks. Throughout this entire epidemic, we've asked Minnesotans to sacrifice. We've asked them to do things that put their own family's financial security somewhat at risk to protect the health of others. And the deal in that is both the federal government and the state government would be there to be partners to help people. Last week, going into Thanksgiving, we talked about one of the most important things every family needs to be concerned about is food security, making sure there's enough to eat on the table every night, and that becomes a challenge. And the other big one when it comes to protection of your family and security of Minnesotans is housing security. This issue is always paramount. It's incredibly important pre-COVID, and all, again, COVID did was highlight those needs and highlight the weaknesses in our system at times to make sure that everybody has a safe place to call home. We know that we've asked people to self-quarantine. We've asked people to stay home. People were leaving their jobs and asked to go back home. Almost unimaginable during a time of pandemic if you didn't have that safe place to go to, or if it was a tenuous situation where you might lose that place. So I want to just first of all thank Minnesotans and have an understanding. A lot of folks are in a position where housing security is a real concern through no fault of their own. And during this time, whether it was putting in eviction moratoriums, working with landlords who have been absolutely fantastic of trying to do the best they can to keep their tenants and their renters safe, to putting in $100 million, a little more than that, in housing assistance. And so we wanted to take some time today, and I want to thank the folks who have joined us, your neighbors on the phone, and the experts in our administration who have worked on this issue in some cases for decades. And I just want folks to know this is a time, if you're needing a little help, we've got a program, the help that we have, it goes until December 7th. So it's really critical that by December 7th at 11:59 p.m., this program is still available. And at this time, over 25,000 Minnesotans have accessed it, requesting more than $67 million in assistance. This is, again, help that is part of the fight against COVID-19. Many folks, either through employment or exposure to COVID-19, had to stay home, and that put them in financial situations where it was difficult to make the rent. If you want to, there's several ways. You can call 211 or you can apply online at 211unitedway.org. Program's still available. You're going to hear from some folks who tell you how this works, how it makes sure that folks stay in their home, make sure that they can pay rent to their landlords. The landlords can pay their mortgages to the banks, and it keeps our economy moving, and it keeps folks safe during COVID-19. So I'm going to turn this over now to the champion in our administration for children and families for the issue of security around our littlest Minnesotans and knowing that housing is truly the foundation to a good start and a healthy life. Lieutenant Governor Flanagan.
Well, thanks so much, Governor, and good afternoon, everybody. You know, like many Minnesotans, I am a renter, and I paid my rent on Tuesday. But so many of our neighbors were unable to pay their rent or had to choose between their mortgage or groceries. To echo the Governor, I want folks to know that there are still resources available to help you and your family. Whether you own or rent, reach out and talk to the people you pay rent to or pay your mortgage to. For homeowners, talk to your lender to see if they will allow you to defer payments for up to a year. And the COVID-19 Housing Assistance Program deadline is at the stroke of midnight on Monday, December 7th. As the Governor mentioned, but I'm going to keep reiterating it because I want people to know, you can apply now at 211unitedway.org. Working to keep people housed and support people experiencing homelessness has been a cornerstone of our pandemic response because housing is a public health issue and homelessness is a public health issue. Minnesota has faced a housing crisis for a very long time, and the pandemic has only exposed and exacerbated that crisis. It did not create it. We know that Minnesotans experiencing homelessness who contract COVID are more likely to need hospital or ICU levels of care. It is incumbent on all of us to make sure that everyone has a safe place to be. With the support of the legislature, we have directed $190 million in state and federal dollars to housing stability and homelessness during this pandemic. We need to sustain support at all levels of government to continue to protect people, to keep them in their homes and to bring them into homes. And at the very least, we must work together to maintain protective spaces like shelters and hotels as we weather the storm together. I'm proud of the state's partnership with Minneapolis and Hennepin County to support the Avivo Village project with 100 spaces to bring people in off the street, and with St. Paul and Ramsey County to provide expanded emergency shelter capacity as our weather turns colder. I want to call out the essential work of Minnesotans who show up every day in shelters, or to those who provide critically important street outreach or are running an isolation hotel for people with no other place to go or to heal. They, too, are essential workers. When we talk about housing and homelessness, we have to also talk about the ways we are working in partnership with one another. No one does this work alone. I want to give a shout out to the Bush and McKnight Foundations. Together, they have committed $1.5 million to help our partners reach more households. Other states have had to close their programs early because of the federal deadline, but resources from Bush and McKnight will be used to support this program and support program and administrators to help an additional 8,000 families get caught up on their bills. And we couldn't do this work without the 50-plus grant administrators and their subgrantees who are reviewing every application and issuing payments to landlords and utility companies and more. We're grateful for the many landlords and property managers that have worked directly with their renters to apply for assistance or work out payment plans. We have worked in collaboration with local governments, tribal governments, nonprofits, landlords, hotel owners, and other private sector partners, and taken decisive action to keep people in their homes and protect our neighbors experiencing homelessness. In total, all across Minnesota, nonprofits, local governments, and other partners have created an additional 2,300 safe spaces for people experiencing homelessness to be. And I want to reiterate, this work not only supports people experiencing homelessness, but support everyone in our community and reduces the demand on our healthcare system during this pandemic. I'm grateful for everyone who has stepped up to keep people housed and safe during this incredibly challenging year. There's more we can do to support our neighbors and relatives experiencing housing insecurity. You can donate. Help these nonprofits do this incredibly difficult and important work. They provide food and shelter. You can speak up, advocate for the housing we need. We got a big bonding bill this year, and I am so grateful for that. But we need more, and we cannot stop until all Minnesotans have a safe, affordable place to call home. Tell your friends and family about the Housing Assistance Program. Tell them to call 211 if they're struggling with housing and bills, and to do it soon so they can apply before the December 7th deadline. And protect each other. Wear your mask. Just like healthcare workers, our shelter and outreach providers are not getting sick at work. They're getting sick in the community. And in far too many cases, they're bringing that back to the very vulnerable, high-risk folks who are living in congregate spaces. We have a lot that we can do together, and I'm grateful for all of our partners who are on this call and who are doing work across the state. So thank you so much. It is now my honor to turn it over to Katrina Hall. Katrina?
Hi, I am Katrina Hall, and I am living in Albert Lea. And like many Minnesotans, my employment ended in March as a direct impact of COVID. And on top of that, I also caregive for my mother, who is very vulnerable to COVID at this time. And regardless of all of this, rent was still due, utilities were still due, and I was in a pretty big bind. And I happened to come across Governor Walz's Facebook that had a link on it to the United Community Action Renters Assistance Program, and I immediately applied. And a couple days later, I got a call from Sarah, one of the workers, and she started working on my application. And within a week, she gave me a call after all the verifications were done that I was approved and that past rent and past utilities would be paid. So I can't say enough how much this program has meant to me and my family. Thank you, Governor Walz. Thank you, everybody that's involved in this. It's something we can do together. It's really changed my life, and I'm just going to end it on that note, and I'll introduce Tara.
Hi, this is Tara Unken from Marshall, Minnesota. I am a landlord and a real estate professional in the area. And I just want to echo some of the things that Katrina had mentioned. We own and oversee dozens of housing rental units in the area. And throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, several tenants had called us with concerns of not being able to make ends meet. And like Lieutenant Governor Flanagan hinted at earlier, not wanting to have them choose between food or housing. So this program has benefited a good handful of our tenants. They're so grateful for having this as an option so they can remain in safe and healthy housing, because housing is a building block of people's lives, and if you don't have safe and secure housing, then it creates other issues and other facets of life. So very grateful not only for the program itself, but also the efficiencies of the program and how the payments are processed and paid directly to the landlord. It saves time, easy application, and the process has been pretty seamless. So grateful for everybody that's played a part in this program.
Thank you, Tara. And I'm just going to go ahead and introduce Emily Bastian, the Vice President for Ending Homelessness at Avivo. Emily.
Hello, and thank you, Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, for hosting our conversation today on this very important topic. Avivo is so proud to be part of this amazing community collaboration. Together, we are making serious strides in helping neighbors experiencing homelessness find paths to shelter and permanent housing, to include in the coming weeks opening a new shelter serving 100 individuals through an innovative model designed to meet people experiencing unsheltered homelessness where they're at. Our community has faced circumstances that makes ending homelessness seem impossible, but the word impossible is just not in Avivo's vocabulary. Making the impossible possible can happen when we believe that every person is deserving of housing. Community members believe the same and work together to learn more and respond to help. And our elected leaders, city, state, county, along with community agencies and philanthropic leaders, connect the funds that enable partners like Avivo to respond immediately. And what really makes the impossible possible is our team at Avivo, who does this intense, worthwhile work. We have 82 passionate staff in our housing and support services area who approach ending homelessness with a whatever it takes attitude. This year, at the end of May, on a day following the murder of George Floyd, when there was evidence of rioting and looting underway near an encampment of South Minneapolis, Avivo's housing team was able, with partnership from local and state leaders, to provide a safe alternative for residents of an encampment, moving them out of harm's way within 3 hours that afternoon and evening, when our outreach team secured a hotel, gathered 70 individuals and their belongings, helped them load onto buses and move them to safety. And after 90 days, supported nearly all of them in finding permanent supportive housing and moving from homelessness to being housed. And then again, this past August, we were able to support over 80 individuals in relocating from an encampment near Franklin and Hiawatha in South Minneapolis, once again to a hotel, where they were able to access wraparound support, including housing assistance. And to date, 24 of those individuals have already moved into permanent housing, and we have 15 additional move-in dates scheduled between now and mid-December. These are just two examples of making the impossible possible, and are a result of state and local government being creative and partnering with the nonprofit sector. You know, there is no one path from homelessness to permanent housing. At Avivo, our priority is housing first. We have street outreach teams, staff who work one-to-one for housing placement, and teams who support moving micro-communities to hotels and then to home. And at Avivo, we see every day that housing is possible and ending homelessness is possible. I cannot say enough how grateful I am for this team that I get to work with every day. They are undaunted and steadfast in this worthwhile work. And with that, I will turn this back to our moderator.
Thank you, Emily. Governor, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Teddy, and we'll take questions here in just a moment. I want to thank Emily, Tara, Katrina, and Lieutenant Governor. But I think segueing on what Emily said, I can tell you I, for one, as the privilege of being the governor of Minnesota, one of the things I'm most grateful for, I'm so humbled by, and it lifts my heart up, is to see the work that's done around sheltering families and sheltering people in Minnesota, the public, private, nonprofit, faith-based. These are some of the most driven, compassionate people and results-oriented people I have ever worked with in any aspect of my life. And when COVID-19, the data, when you hear the numbers, Commissioner Malcolm and I talked about this, it strips the humanity away from people. Not 92 is not just a number. That is 92 of our neighbors, people, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, parents. And it stripped away the human contact, the social distancing. And the one thing I can tell you is this work around homelessness, just the sense of human decency that goes into it. Just examples you heard each of these folks give, whether it be personal, people they work with, or even greater than that. Just organizations, just little things. In Rochester here recently, multiple organizations with the city library system in Rochester, in conjunction with the Mayo Civic Center, created a daytime warming space, an overnight shelter. Not turning our back on our neighbors, not seeing it as a problem that we wish would just go away, but the humanity of it. And as we say, and Commissioner Ho has taught me so well on this issue of math around it, and refusing to allow us to say this is just too hard, that we can't eliminate it, and watching non-partners come together, deliver 1,000 hot meals each day, especially to indigenous folks in our encampments here. Those things all matter. So in the midst of COVID and the issues that it caused, it gave us an opportunity to rise up to our better angels. And I can tell you around this issue, that's exactly what this is. And again, as you heard the story from Katrina, through no fault of her own, only doing what is asked in the name of public safety, was she put in a situation. That's where we all are in this together. And I'm proud of these programs we put together. I'm honored to work with the partners. I tell Minnesotans we need some certainty, both here at the state level in a package of relief, and we need a federal package of relief. But in the absence of that, our program is in place for another 5 days to apply. I'm again, encouraging and trying to do all I can, 211unitedway.org. And as you heard Katrina say, and Tara say, it's a pretty efficient and pretty simple system to navigate, which sometimes is saying a lot, I know, when you get into these governmental programs, but this one's doing it. So with that, Teddy, I'll turn it back to you and open it up to questions. And I would remind our reporters that we have a wealth of knowledge on the phone in three commissioners and the person who teaches all of us, Kathy Tenbrook.
Thank you, Governor. Operator, we're ready to take some questions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if you would like to ask a question, simply press star followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. Again, press star 1 to ask a question. One moment for your first question. We have a question from Peter Callahan with MinnPost. Your line is open.
Okay, thank you. Maybe this is for Commissioner Ho. Looking at some of the numbers, $47 million has been distributed to administrators as of December 2nd. That's less than half of the fund. I know some of that's going to go for administration. Why has more money not been approved, and why has that approved money not gotten out to landlords by this time? Is it administrative, or is there less demand than you had anticipated?
Peter, this is Jennifer Ho, Commissioner of Minnesota Housing. Thanks for the question. Yeah, the first thing I think it's important to know is that we have all been figuring this out as we go. 38 states have stood up these programs, really in record speed. My team got this up and running in 5 weeks during a period of time with extraordinary uncertainty in terms of, we knew there was need out there, but it was really hard to quantify. You have to remember when we got this money, the $600 a week a bump up to unemployment insurance was just ending. And then we got the $300 increase for a short period of time. It was just really hard to quantify what the level of need was going to be. We also had a lot more people apply in the opening weeks, but requesting smaller dollar amounts than we would have thought. So we had a huge amount of volume. People weren't as backed up as we had feared. And so to me, the most important thing is that our partners who are out there doing this work have just continued to roll up their sleeves and adapt and adapt and adapt based on just what we're learning every single day. And so, I didn't promise the governor and lieutenant governor that we knew for sure that we'd have $100 million of requests. But what we did know is that we didn't want to have less money than the amount of need. And I don't know how many more requests are going to come in now at the beginning of December, but the most important thing to me is that every Minnesotan who needs assistance knows that we still have money available and that we will process all the applications that we get in, even if it goes beyond the federal deadline of December 30th, which has frankly, put our backs against the walls in terms of how quickly we've had to move on this. So I guess I feel like the most important thing is that we have enough to be able to process every application, and I'm less concerned about did we set aside more than we're going to need. I'll give this back to the governor and lieutenant governor to do other great things with before the deadline if we don't have, if we're not going to spend it all.
Okay, and can I ask you a quick follow-up? Are you picking up anything from DC or others in housing that is there any possibility that those deadlines for December 30 CARES Act money could be extended?
This is Jennifer Ho again. We believe that it's possible that if some of the current language that's being discussed came through, that there could be an extension of that. But since DC has been a little unpredictable, I think we just have to deal with the facts. And then if the facts change tomorrow, we'll change course tomorrow. If the special session yields something else, we'll change course, the day that we have that. We're just working with kind of the facts that we have in front of us.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Brian Danks with MN Public Radio. Your line is open.
Hi, Governor. Is it your intention to redirect whatever remains after December 7th, or are you going to let it stay parked in case the federal government allows for this program to go past the new year?
Yeah, no, Brian, I think that, and the commissioner's right. We don't know. We've been asking, repeatedly till I'm hoarse, about extending the deadline as a minimum. At this point in time, we have not made that decision. I for one, would say, though, the last week has given me great hope. I think we're going to get a relief package, and I would assume being part of that would be an extension on the dates of this would allow us to continue on. But at this time, we don't know. I think the commissioner's right. It's day to day, but I am just every indication, and I've been on the phone relentlessly with folks in D.C., with our delegation, with other governors, with other members of Congress. It's hopeful right now. So I think it'll depend on what happens there. And I think this week would be a week we would know. Obviously, they're shooting for the CR, the continuing resolution on the 11th. And I think the two will be tied together.
And with apologies to Teddy, a little off topic here, but your discussion yesterday with legislative leaders, has there been any connection made between passing a short-term state relief plan and the duration of your pause on the restaurants, hospitality, fitness centers, and the youth sports? Are those two things going to be connected?
I don't think so. I won't speak, and I'll let the legislative leaders say that. It did not come up in the conversation. I would characterize yesterday's conversation as the most cordial, bipartisan, and hopeful that we've had in a while. It's not as if relationships are horrible here. We still continue to get things done with split legislature. But yesterday's tone was really different, really positive, I think, all the way around, and very candid. So I did not hear that. I would assume there will be some members of the caucus that are pushing that. I get the pressure that these leaders get inside their own caucus, but not at this time.
Our next question is from Chris Saris with Star Tribune. Your line is open.
Thank you. I was just following up on Peter's question earlier. So do you have a current estimate for the amount of the housing assistance program, the money that's in the program that still has not been allocated or spent? And also, what's going to happen to that money when the program expires?
Governor, I think that's for me. Yep. This is Jennifer Ho. We'll know on the 8th, after the program closes at midnight on the 7th, how many applications and how much money people will have applied for. And the reason that we're closing the program on Monday at midnight is because we need to have time, if there's going to be unspent money, for the state to be able to reallocate it to other important things, like helping people who are experiencing homelessness and other important things that the state's doing. So the reason that we're closing it on the 7th is because of the federal deadline, the need to have it all allocated. But that's why it's so important for you to help us get out the word, because we know that the need is out there. It's the deadline that's really forcing us to have to, the federal deadline that's forcing us to have to close it. So everything that you can do to help us get the word out that there's still money available and people can take their December payments that they're going to miss and apply for assistance so we can get help out to the people who need it. I mean, that's what we're really hoping you can help us do.
Got it. Yeah, we'll certainly help. How much money is left in the program?
Well, right now we've got requests for $67 million as of the end of November, but that was before December rent came due, and so we're really hoping for a big final push here. And then we'll have to settle up administrative expenses with all of our government and nonprofit partners who are administering it as well. So we've got room for one more big push here to pay December bills.
Sure. So is your estimate that there's about $30 million left?
As of November 30th, but December bills came due on December 1st. So we think that this first week in December is really important to help more folks. One important message, I think, to people who apply, and I really appreciate Tara and Katrina's words, but because the volume of applications has been so high, if you do apply, please just be patient because it will take a little bit of time for your administrator to get to it. But what we want people to know is if you apply by midnight on Monday, that we're going to have people processing those applications until we get through them all. And because we have the generous support of McKnight and Bush Foundation, we're able to cover the administrative expenses after December 30, even though the federal dollars expire on December 30.
Okay, thank you.
Our next question is from Steve Karnowski with Associated Press. Your line is open.
Yeah, hi, thanks. This is probably for Commissioner Malcolm. Yesterday we had some discussion on the letter from the firefighters about wanting first responders bumped up into Category 1A. And as of yesterday, you thought that the CDC guidance was binding on the states, but we're seeing some differences between the states on which groups of people end up in which categories between 1A, 1B, and 1C. Do you have any more clarity on that today?
Hi, this is Commissioner Malcolm. No, as far as I know, we are still operating under the directive that the federally determined 1A, 1B, 1C categories are firm. There is, as we've talked about, more work to be done on prioritization within those broad categories, but the 1A, 1B, and 1C categories are I have no additional information beyond what I shared yesterday.
Thank you.
Steve, and if I could, thank you, Jan. I think that's exactly right. And the interest around the vaccine is absolutely critical. We're glad people are paying attention. They're listening. This is a big deal. We're doing all the work, and we spent a lot of time this morning to get everything right, to get this plan right, to make sure that we're coordinating with all the public, private, nonprofit hospitals, the manufacturers, the federal government, which we're very dependent on, to make sure that the information we get out is exactly right and we're doing this right. And there's so many of these granular questions that are critically important. I just want to assure Minnesotans that we are working pretty much around the clock to get that right, get that information ready. And it's my intention that I told my team that I believe around next Tuesday, we want to do a deep dive, and get the information as we have it in real time. Jan, is that right? And that's how we're thinking.
Yes, thank you, Governor.
Our next question is from Bill Werner with Minnesota Press. Your line is open.
Yeah, thank you for taking the question. I think my question is also for Commissioner Malcolm, following up on the previous question from my colleague. Commissioner, I know yesterday there was you had indicated that the initial, shipment of a COVID vaccine would not probably be sufficient to cover all healthcare workers in Minnesota, and I think you were maybe going to get some numbers on what percentage of them. I'm trying to get an idea. Is the initial blast of the vaccine going to be able to cover 30% or 50%? And a corollary question to that then, if there isn't sufficient vaccine to cover all the healthcare workers in Minnesota, does that mean that the nursing home residents wait until all those folks are covered? Or help us understand how that would work in this initial shot of vaccines in Minnesota.
Well, thanks for the question, Bill. That's a great example of the work that is still ongoing in these next days, as the governor has said. What we don't yet have, and we'll hopefully be able to share next week with you, is what we might expect over the first several weeks. So certainly, the initial shipment will not be sufficient to cover all of the groups in 1A. But how quickly will that ramp up? How quickly will we be able to deploy it, and how then will we kind of allocate those initial weeks worth of doses across those priority populations is all the work that I've mentioned and Chris Erzman has mentioned, that we have a Minnesota vaccine advisory work group that is kind of awaiting and will now be able to dig in, and they're meeting actually tomorrow with the framework that the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, the CDC's committee, has laid out for Phase 1A. So they're going to be digging into some of those very questions with us tomorrow. So that's part of why we'll be able to share more with you next week.
if I may, Commissioner, and this one might actually be one for the governor. It may even be an unfair question, but I probably need to ask it. Given the pressure on hospitals, and that's acknowledged, and that it's continuing, I'm assuming from all that we're hearing, Governor, do you think that this initial supply of vaccine that we get will be enough to vaccinate enough healthcare workers that we could relieve some of that pressure and maybe assuage some of Minnesotans' concerns about not, potentially not having the hospital care if it's necessary? Sorry if it's not a fair question, but it's one that it's probably need to be asked.
Yeah, no, it's fair, and I want to just be clear. These are the questions people need to be asking, and we're going to do the best we can to answer. The one thing I want to assure Minnesotans on is that Minnesota's vaccination plan was kind of the model that the federal government worked for. We were one of those five states that were used to do that. We're going to start getting out numbers. Just so you know, Bill, numbers that we do have is we know we've got 163,000 hospital staff across Minnesota, all corners of the state. So we've got some numbers we know ahead of time. We will get those numbers. We will get confirmation on, as Jan said, Commissioner Malcolm said, on what's coming in. The one thing that I would tell Minnesotans is this. The vaccine is not going to take the pressure off the hospitals that they're experiencing now in this peak. That is not going to happen. It's a two-shot regime. It's going to take some time. This is going to be the long-term solution to it. But the only thing right now to take the pressure off the hospitals is wear the mask, do not gather in gatherings, do and follow that guidance that's out there to reduce the spread. Because it's not going to be a magic bullet with the vaccine. It's not as if we're going to give somebody a shot and then the next day everything's back to normal there. So it's going to be a part of it, but even during this vaccination phase, it's going to roll out over a number of weeks and into the spring and early summer for everyone. We still need to continue to do these things. So it's a fair question. Every question around the vaccine needs to be asked, and I know, and I think it's right to ask it now. We're going to continue to say, as we truly are gathering data, we want to put this together next week in a presentation that is factually and distribution-wise tight as it can be to answer some of these questions. But I just want to reiterate, the vaccine is not what's going to initially relieve the pressure on the hospitals. It's the behavior of Minnesotans that will relieve the pressure.
Thank you, Governor.
Our next question is from Theo Kit from Fox 9. Your line's open.
Hi. Before I get to my question, I just want to make sure I heard this number right. Governor, you said 163,000 hospital staff around the state. Is that just at hospitals, or is that healthcare workers in total? That's a new number I hadn't heard before.
Yeah, I think it's hospital. I better be careful about doing that. I'm getting these numbers too, so I can start, cross-referencing of what we need. That's the number I got with hospital staff. Now, obviously, they're not on all the time. There's shifts involved. It depends on when they're coming in. And again, when we say hospital staff, I assume what's included in that is folks that do the custodial work, parts of that. And I think one of the things is that we don't have this yet, and Jan has been great about it, and I'm pushing her team 20 hours a day. The granular details around this. Obviously, when we say hospital staff, not every one of those is going to necessarily have to be vaccinated in the first wave. I had deep conversations today with our food producers food production folks are in 1B, and they're wondering Minnesota's kind of large presence in food production and the pipeline makes that really important for a lot of other states. Obviously, as we've always said, New York City depends on Minnesota farmers and Minnesota food producers, from Cargill to General Mills. But that's the number I have right now. I'll be careful, Jan, about putting these out and clarifying that. At this time, can we put an asterisk by that 163 until we get the exact clarification?
Okay. Here's my actual question, if I may. Today, the high school league put out basically a whole bunch of contingency plans on when to start the winter sports season based on whether you extend your shutdown of high school sports beyond December 18th, Governor. Are you going to do that? Are you going to extend the shutdown?
That decision hasn't been made, and I think I agree with these contingency plans that people put out. I think the high school league is looking at that. They were very clear saying that it's going to be dependent on the health situation. Again, as I have from the beginning of this, I'll accept full responsibility for the decisions we make, but those decisions are being predicated on what state we are in the virus. So at this point in time, I cannot yet tell. As I think I wouldn't call it foreshadowing. I would hope by this point in time people are looking at numbers and are able to read this. We reported 6,100 plus cases today, a 12+% positivity rate, and 92 deaths. We are still in the heart of the worst part of this pandemic. And so if that would continue, and our indications seem to show that we may be nearing that peak, then we'll make those decisions. But I think as far as the high school league saying, if all goes well, we'll put that out, it's going to be dependent on where we're at in the virus. And again, I just think people need to recognize these are some of the highest numbers of anywhere on earth. Yesterday was the deadliest day in the pandemic for the United States. Almost unimaginable that we got to this point because poor decisions that were made from March till now in many cases, and this rampant virus. But those are decisions that will be made in the near future.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Theo. Operator, I think we have time for one more question today.
Thank you. Our last question is from Crystal Booth from KSTP. Your line is open.
Hi there. I wanted to ask, I understand there are protections through the executive order against evictions, but are there any protections planned for any tenants facing rent increases from landlords, especially as the new year approaches?
Yeah, Commissioner Ho, I might let you're well versed in this law, and this is one we're worried about in terms of what happens once things start to get better. This issue of back rent and housing insecurity is not going to go away. And if we have what some predicted as an avalanche of evictions, what does that look like? So, Commissioner Ho, would you be willing to pick that one up?
Sure, Governor. So first of all, the evictions executive order doesn't relieve people of the responsibility of paying rent, which is why kind of getting information out about the COVID Housing Assistance Program is so important. And also it doesn't go beyond that and tell landlords that they can't raise the rent. I think, so yes, people who are financially hard pressed, if their rents would naturally rise at the beginning of the year, are going to be harder pressed. I think that this is why it's so important that we have a constructive conversation with the legislature about when the pandemic is winding down and when the governor lifts the state of emergency, the evictions moratorium will end as well. And it's not really in anybody's interest to kind of, just have this, as folks have been saying, an avalanche of evictions. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to have a good conversation with the legislature this session in order to think about what types of an off-ramp could be built for the evictions moratorium. I think that a lot of states that ended their evictions moratoriums earlier, or people who weren't covered by the CDC one, we just really clearly seen the relationship between folks who are hard hit by the economics of COVID and people who are very vulnerable to COVID, and the fact that at a time when the homeless system is so strained, as Emily was talking about, it's just not the right time for that safety net to try to deal with, thousands of more people needing homeless services and shelters. So I'm hoping for a productive conversation with the legislature, but you're right, there's not a protection against rent increases.
Governor, do you have any plans to put any protections in place, especially as some people are facing those rent increases come, say, January or February?
I think those are ongoing conversations. I would like to highlight the great partnership we've had with building management and with landlords. It's been tough on them, but they've really, I think, stepped into that. So those conversations will happen. We're obviously watching, what the federal government does too in their next package. I remind folks it may not seem like it, but the federal government has used emergency powers during this whole time, as of 49 other states have, and we'll wait and see what they do. But we're certainly very cognizant of the issue.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Lieutenant Governor, I'm going to kick it over to you to wrap us up today.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today, and to Tara and Emily and Katrina. Thank you for just your words and for being part of this really important work. I'm grateful that the media is covering this critically important issue. This is a time of year when we think a lot about being grateful for what we have, but also can think of those in our community who may need a little extra help and support. If that happens to be you this holiday season, there is no shame in asking for help. You can go to 211unitedway.org, or you can call 211 from your phone to get connected to people who can help you out. 2020 has been incredibly difficult. We have never been through a pandemic before. If you are feeling stressed or worried about how you will pay your rent or mortgage, there's a lot of folks who want to help you. So thank you so much. Stay safe and take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Thanks, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's conference call. Thank you everyone for joining. You may now disconnect.